Everyone, welcome back to Gosh Darn Dandy Time. My name is Baby, and tonight we're going to do some book reviews, parts 1 through 10, I think. I have a lot of books. I have 5 books covering one topic, 2 books covering another topic, and 2 more individuals by themselves. So for this one, I'm just going to actually show the books, and then we'll move on to another video. This one is Forgotten Fire, a book I read many times from, I think, 2000. So I read this, I think, about 8th grade, about 2004 or 2005, and then maybe 2 or 3 more times in high school, 2 or 3 more times after high school, and then recently I bought this on Amazon about 3 months ago, and I reread it again. Sad story, it was about the Armenian Holocaust. A lot of European countries don't acknowledge that the Armenian Holocaust existed, but it did. It did. I'll get to this in a separate video. Although, the great thing about this book smell. I love books that have that book smell. Books with good chapbooks and novels, biographies, biopics that have that book smell. This one was a Laurel Leaf Publishing. Some Scholastic books also have book smells to them. Oh look, I didn't actually finish rereading this book. It's on my bookmark. So, the second book is Whatever It Takes. It was a non-fiction expose story of Degrassi, the Degrassi franchise, the Degrassi industry. Degrassi is that great teen, it was on the N. I'm going to say the N, which was a digital cable channel before Teen Nick claimed Degrassi for its own. It was on Noggin, then the N, and then it was on Teen Nick, and then it was on Netflix. Netflix kind of ruined it. I didn't like the Netflix edition of Degrassi, The Next Class. It just wasn't very good, and the episodes were down to like 27 minutes each, and it just didn't fit. But this covers a lot of the backstory of the franchise of Degrassi, dating back to the mid-1970s, when the first TV after-school specials aired in majority of central Canada. Not so much the U.S., but then later on there was Degrassi Junior High, Degrassi High, Degrassi The Next Generation, Degrassi Next Class, and so on and so forth. Here's 2 more books. These are, we got the McGuffey's 6 Eclectic Reader. I bought this at an independent bookstore, I think in Auburn or Enumclaw in King County, Washington. This is quite difficult to read. I've not actually read it. It's part of the McGuffey Basel book series that was used in the 1850s to the 1980s in a lot of farm schools and rural schools and country schools. It was essentially the early days of textbooks and reading class textbooks. Those anthology textbooks with silly excerpts and short stories and poetry and writing and reading and grammar lessons in them. And in the 1850s to the 1980s, these were quite common and popular to find in many schools and many classrooms across the United States and Canada alike. They started at the primer and then volumes 1 through 7, along with the speller. Eventually, I'll have all the books, but right now I only have volume 6. I don't know how to read it because I gotta look on some different websites of how to read it. The next one is a child story reader. It's a first reader, kind of like McGuffey's. It's kind of like a Dick and Jane book, but this was published the 1920s to the 1930s. It had a simple, easy to read pictures and sentences and paragraphs. It was mainly like maybe a first grade, second grade level back then in the days of 1920s and 30s and 40s. It was just sentences, learning how to read sentences, understanding commas, periods, quotations, inflection. See, very short stories are 5 or 6 pages each. Before Dick and Jane books, before I Can Read books. Nowadays, we have the I Can Read book series. When I was a kid, I read a lot of Henry and Mudge, which was a classic series of I Can Read books. I kind of miss those books. And then we have these books. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have more books in a bin, but I have a little bit of a fascination. I have more books than just these. The rest are in a closet, buried away. But I have an interest in, like, an era that I didn't grow up in. An era that was practically over with by the time I was born. The era of eugenics, the era of institutions, the era of warehousing children and adults who were defective by society's normalcy standards, putting them away in countryside, villas, cottages, old decrepit buildings, whatnot, on colonies and farms, mental hospitals, small communities where they were away from majority of mainstream society because they had a developmental disability or a psychiatric disability, a physical disability, a need, a medical defect inside their body that mandated more medical care, or palliative care didn't exist in the 1920s to the 1970s. And if your child was born with, say, Down syndrome or a developmental disability, was diagnosed before the age of 6, special education services were available, but not available to everyone. Sometimes parents and doctors alike encouraged each other to put their children away into places like institutions. Well, I'll get to these books soon. Like, subscribe, comment.